Excellent. As you all see, we have our good and longtime friend, David Carden, on the screen. David is the Deputy Head of the Humanitarian Efforts for the Syrian Crisis, and he's speaking to us from Gaziantep. David, you go ahead, and then we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for having me in today's noon briefing. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm delighted to share that after 10 years, the position of Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria Crisis, which I currently hold, will be officially abolished as of tomorrow. And this is part of the UN's transition efforts in a new Syria, with the aim of streamlining the coordination of the response under the leadership of Damascus by the end of June. So as Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator, I've had the huge privilege of serving the people of Syria since 2023, having arrived in Gaziantep in southern Turkey in the aftermath of the devastating earthquakes that year. And since then, I've led a dedicated community of aid workers from the UN and NGOs to deliver humanitarian assistance from Turkey into northwest Syria. But I was certainly not the first, having built on the legacy of my predecessors who have been part of this cross-border mechanism since 2014. This was a structure born out of necessity amidst entrenched political divides to ensure humanitarian access to the most vulnerable Syrians. It was the only way to deliver aid and services to northwest Syria during that period, where 4.2 million people were in need of aid last year. And it has been a successful cross-border humanitarian operation. Since 2014, we facilitated the delivery of more than 62,000 trucks of food, medical supplies, emergency shelters, and other aid from Turkey, reaching millions of Syrians each month. So far this year, the UN has dispatched 936 trucks with aid for all of Syria through this cross-border modality, which is more than the whole of last year. And for partners such as WFP, it is a cost-effective route to reach the most vulnerable people throughout the country. But the support extends far beyond the delivery of relief items to supporting people to rebuild their livelihoods, and also advocating for the protection of civilians in the face of constant shelling and airstrikes. We rehabilitated homes, schools, and hospitals. We provided critical health, education, and protection services to support the most vulnerable. We've moved displaced families out of worn-out tents into safer and more dignified shelters. And since 2014, the Syria Cross-Border Humanitarian Fund, under my custodianship and that of my predecessors, has allocated almost $1.1 billion to fund life-saving and early recovery projects. Last year, the fund allocated nearly $67 million amidst the challenging funding landscape, with 70% directed to Syrian NGOs who remain at the forefront of the response. And it's very much part of the UN's localization efforts. And half of those supported are women and girls who bear the brunt of the conflict. And we were able to achieve all of this with the continuous support of donors and the international community, particularly the government of Turkey, which has over the years been very supportive of the cross-border humanitarian operation. Now, times have changed. Today we have a new Syria, one that's brimming with hope and opportunity. But while the levels of conflict have subsided in many parts of the country, the humanitarian crisis in Syria is far from over. More than 16 million people today are in need of aid. That is 7 out of every 10 Syrians, the majority of whom are women and children. Over 40% of the needs are concentrated in Idlib and Aleppo. And whilst we have seen a gradual increase in returnees this year, Syria does remain one of the world's largest displacement crises, with 7 million people displaced. So since last December, more than 1 million internally displaced people have returned, but most of whom were displaced in the last 2 months of 2024. But around 225,000 people have departed from camps, but this still represents only a small fraction of the 2 million people living in camps across northwest and northeast Syria. Last month, I led a mission to a place called Syria in Idlib, a former frontline area, where I spoke with returnees and mine action partners who are doing critical work clearing minefields and destroying explosive remnants of war in order to try to facilitate and promote returns. And the devastation in Syria was absolutely overwhelming and more severe than anything I witnessed following the 2023 earthquakes. So the UN and its partners are doing what they can with the resources available. But we're deeply alarmed by the lack of funding, which has already led to the suspension of water and sanitation services in camps, safe spaces for women and girls, and other humanitarian activities across Syria. And to date, the humanitarian community has secured $179 million, less than 9% of the $2 billion needed to help the most vulnerable until the end of June this year. So this is the time to invest in Syria, as the country is in a pivotal stage of transition, to help shape a more self-reliant future for its people, and to support safe and dignified returns. We sincerely hope that the humanitarian phase will be as short as possible, so we can move towards recovery and reconstruction, and in that context, see the further easing of sanctions. We are encouraged by the reduction in levels of conflict, and if this positive trajectory continues, people will have the chance to live in peace. This is what I've heard time and time again from communities, having crossed into northwest Syria more than 30 times in the past 2 years. People do not want temporary relief. They want opportunities to earn a living and rebuild their lives with dignity. The work of a humanitarian is to work themselves out of a job and build the conditions where humanitarian aid is no longer needed. With the discontinuation of my post, I hope that this also reflects Syria's trajectory towards a brighter and more stable future. The most vulnerable people in Syria deserve no less, and I wish them all the very best. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank you very much, David. We'll now take some questions. Edie Lederer, Associated Press.
Thank you very much, David, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. A couple of questions. Can you tell us about your relations with the new governing authorities in Syria? Are they helpful? Are they interested? Is humanitarian access totally opened up? And I wondered if you could also talk to us a little about the fallout from the attacks especially in the Alawite areas, and whether aid is getting to people in need there and what the situation is like today. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, David.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, we have had relations, and the UN has had contact with the authorities who are currently in Damascus, the transitional authorities, when they were controlling Idlib and northern Aleppo. And we continue to have good relations with them in Damascus. And we're working with them to try to develop more efficient procedures for aid delivery. I mean, there's a engagement at the practical and problem-solving level to try to address issues such as liquidity challenges, and further streamline procedures. And we definitely count on their continued support to try to further ease registration with humanitarian NGOs. And as Stefan said, it's very good news that the foreign minister will be in New York later this week. I would say on the Alawite areas, I mean, Stefan did address this earlier, but I think, in these coastal areas, whilst we frankly, thankfully, have not seen a return to the horrific violence of last month, there have been incidents affecting civilians, which continues to be reported, and certainly tens of thousands remain displaced, including nearly 30,000 who fled to Lebanon. And while we are working with local partners to deliver critical assistance, insecurity does continue to limit access to many of these rural areas. I think on access in general, it has improved since December last year, and we do have good access to most parts of the country at the moment.
Thank you. Pam Falk?
Thank you, Mr. Carden, for the briefing. Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. A follow-up to Edie's question on the treatment of minorities, Christians, Alawites. There are reports of violence, but in addition to repatriation or taking, really, of homes of those communities that's happening now. Is the UN in any way part of the fact-finding commission of Al-Shara? And can you clarify why your mandate is closing? Thank you.
Go ahead, David.
So, well, my mandate, I guess we had something that was called the whole of Syria structure, when different parts of the country were under the control of different groups and different actors. And this was put in place around 10 years ago to try to ensure that we, the UN and our partners, were able to engage, because we engage with all parties to conflicts, and to ensure that we were able to gain access to the most vulnerable people in need, no matter where they were. And, we had the RCHC in Damascus, the Regional Humanitarian Coordinator in Amman, and the Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator in Gaziantep. And of course, the picture has evolved over years, but the cross-border humanitarian operation from several countries, but most recently in Turkey, was backed by a UN Security Council resolution, which did not pass in July 2023. And since then, it's been a more consent-based arrangement. But right now, of course, with the positive developments in the country, the decision was taken to ensure a unified coordination structure under the leadership of the HC in Damascus. So I guess that explains why my particular post is being discontinued. On the question about the fact-finding mission, I might defer to Stefan on that one, because I am based in Gaziantep and have not been part of that particular process.
Thank you. Sinan?
Demir from Ruda Media Network. I have 3 questions, if that's okay. First thing, how is your relationship with the Kurdish administration from northeast Syria? That's the first question. And the second question, we know there is a ceasefire around Tishrin Dam, and how this ceasefire helps, you to deliver the humanitarian aids. And the third question, can you give us an update about Afrin, which is northwest Syria? We know the Kurdish families trying to go back to their home, and they kind of going some hard time with the settlers in Afrin city. If you can tell us, what is the situation there now? Thank you.
Okay, well, our sense is that certainly the attacks affecting civilians and infrastructure in the northeast have receded, and movement restrictions have eased in parts of Aleppo city. And the good news is that the repairs, you alluded to Tishrin Dam, repairs are happening, and ICRC and UNICEF are part of that. And this is absolutely critical because it will enable the restoration of water and electricity to more than 400,000 people in eastern Aleppo. And our understanding is that thousands of people displaced in the northeast are preparing to return to Afrin.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Go ahead and then Edie.
Thank you. Maureen Hussein with IPS News. So if your mandate will be ending tomorrow, and as you've sort of mentioned that there are still some humanitarian operations still remaining in Syria, what I would like to know is what will the UN's presence be in Syria going forward, and whether like they will still be involved in humanitarian operations while they're being led by the incoming government. Thank you.
No, I mean, the UN will most definitely be involved in humanitarian operations in the future. There's no question about that. As I mentioned at the beginning, the needs are still immense. You know, we have 16 million people in need, but the coordination of the response will take place under the leadership of the HC in Damascus, rather than having this structure, which was, you know, is rather unique in the global context, to have this context where you have different coordinators outside the country supporting the delivery of assistance. And it worked in the Syria context because it enabled better access to the most vulnerable. But the problem, of course, we have is that there's a lack of funding. As I said earlier, only 9% of humanitarian requirements have been covered. And that's a huge challenge. And we're not just, I think, in this context, but in other parts of the world as well.
One last question, Edie Lederer.
Two quick follow-ups. David, the first. What are you going to be doing? Are you going to be moving to Damascus? And secondly, why do you think that the humanitarian appeal for Syria, given the change in government, is only funded at 9%?
Well, to answer your first question, I will be moving to Juba in South Sudan, where I will be head of the OCHA office there, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So that is my next job. In terms of the funding, I mean, it is a very difficult global environment right now. I mean, many donors have reduced their contributions to Syria. We had a conference in Brussels, I think, in just recently, and the pledges, the pledges, I haven't got the figures off the top of my head, but they were significantly less than last year. And I think it's a difficult environment, and we've seen some member states, changing their allocations and, putting more into defense as opposed to reducing their aid budgets to accommodate that. So it's just a very tough environment. And, we on the ground really have to try and do less with more.
David, thank you very much. We wish you safe travels and good luck in Juba. And we hope to see you soon back at the briefing from Juba. Take care. Thank you all.